All right, good morning. We are going to discuss intelligence this morning. So a couple of things. These are the standards just to know, and you can go back and look at the presentation to look at these standards are that you'll meet by the end of this. And this will be your bell ringer today. So the first thing I want you to think about when you're listening to this lecture today is that there are some questions to consider. How is intelligence defined? The one thing that you need to understand is that intelligence is the ability to learn from experience, acquire knowledge, and effectively use resources in adapting new situations. So when we talk about this lecture today and you listen, you need to also reference in your notes of how is intelligence measured, how are extremes of intelligence explained. The first thing that we're going to discuss are the theories of intelligence. First theory we're going to discuss is going to be general intelligence, which is the G factor and the S factor were created by Charles Spearman. The G factor is general intelligence. And when you discuss general intelligence, it's like an overall knowledge or an overall gathering of intelligence. Then you get the S factor, which S stands for specific, which could be task-specific intelligence. And so when you're looking and you think about general intelligence, you kind of want to envision like a circle, and that's where your G factor is, and then like little petals or tabs that come outside of that general intelligence would be like specific task-oriented intelligence that you have. There's everyone can have general intelligence, but some of us may have specific mastery of certain realms or areas of intelligence. The second one is going to be multiple intelligence, which is created by Howard Gardner. It is going to have a giant dispute or an issue that people are going to have with multiple intelligence. He is going to dispute the fact and claim that there cannot just be one single intelligence, that people may have multiple. And he claimed that there actually existed to be 9 multiple intelligence. The first one is going to be interpersonal intelligence, and the reason that I picked Freud is because Freud is all about the conscious, subconscious mind, motivations, underlining, and that are forthright and out in the open. And so interpersonal intelligence is going to be sensitivity to the feelings of others and understanding the motivation of others. When we discuss interpersonal intelligence, I use this picture of this cat looking, and he sees himself as a lion, because interpersonal intelligence is understanding of one's emotions, your own emotions, and how they kind of guide your actions. So it's being in tune with yourself. The next intelligence is going to be visual and spatial intelligence, which is the ability to understand how objects are oriented in space. So I use like a piece of artwork because artists, when they paint or they design anything, they understand that, when you're looking at perspective and things like that here, that this item over here has got to be presented smaller than the individuals that are in the forefront in the image. So I always think of people who are really good with geometry and can envision where shapes and things are moving. Verbal and linguistic intelligence is the ability to effectively and stylistically use language. So public speakers. So I have MLK up here and John F. Kennedy because they were great orators. You could think of people like even like Aristotle in history that were great in using language to stylistically and effectively gain the masses, or to be convincing. Then you have musical and rhythmic intelligence, which is the ability to compose or perform music. So these are just people I like to listen to, but you can think of Yo-Yo Ma, who's a celloist, Edgar Meyer, who's a bass player. Isaac Perlman is a famous violinist. So people who can perform or even compose music. Which compose means to like write your own music. Beethoven, Bach, all those old guys. And then when we talk about mathematics, you need to think about logical and mathematical intelligence, which is really the ability to think logically and solve mathematical problems. So I have Albert Einstein up here. The next one would be body and kinesthetic intelligence, which is the ability to control one's body motions. Now, it's kind of tricky because it's like, well, we all control our bodies, but when I show a ballerina and I show a baseball player, you've honed in this motion to do a specific task. And so I like to relate it a lot to athletes, because athletes they take our regular body motions and hone them into a specific skill, whether it's pitching, whether it's plie-ing, if that makes sense. Then you have the naturalistic intelligence, able to recognize patterns in nature. So I got Steve Irwin up here. You can also think about Jane Goodall, or just even people who study nature, like biology and the sciences, that they recognize patterns like Darwin. studied nature in the Galapagos Islands. And the last one is existentialist intelligence, which is pretty much the ability to see the big picture of the human world. And they ask questions about the existence and purpose of humans. So a lot of times I think of philosophers, Greek philosophers, Renaissance philosophers, or even, people in our modern society now that study philosophy, or that they just want to figure out the bigger picture and the purpose of humans in the world. And we still have individuals like that today. The next thing that I want to show you is that this is the third theory, which will be the emotional intelligence theory. It's by Daniel Goleman. First of all, he's going to say that there can be emotional intelligence. Like, why can't it matter more than IQ? And he believes that emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, perceive, and control emotions of yourself, and others. So his big debate is, well, why does IQ, the intelligence quotient, have to be higher than emotional intelligence? And especially because emotional intelligence can be more relative and useful in the everyday world. Not saying that IQ cannot, just giving you a different perspective here. Then we have the triarch theory of intelligence, which is by Robert Sternberg. It's 3 parts: practical, analytical, and creative. So I'm going to reference back to practical. Practical would be like you use information to get along in life and become successful. We have a lot of individuals who have more of a practical mindset. Then you have analytical, which is like they break down problems for analysis. And then creative would be, excuse me, I didn't mean to zoom out, how they deal with new and different concepts, and then they generate novel ideas of thinking. So in your notes right now, next to these 3 items, I'd like for you to jot down a job that you think could go with practical, analytical, and creative. All right. Now we're going to talk about measuring intelligence. So you need to think about, how do we assess something we have difficult defining? There are constant debates about how do we measure IQ? How do we gain or not understand people's different levels of intelligence? So the first thing you need to understand is that we do have intelligence testing, which one test was created by Alfred Binet. And Binet is going to have this concept of mental age, which is the measure of intelligence performance with specific age. Which you can even, I've seen it online, on social media, where you can take a mental age test. And then you have Louis Terman, who was a Stanford professor in the United States. Binet is going to be in Europe. And he's actually going to bring the test to the United States and create the Stanford Binet test, okay? And one thing that you need to be familiar with is the intelligence quotient, which is defined originally as your IQ is going to equal your MA or your CA times 100. So the formula used was originally by Binet, but the average score is 100. Okay? And then we're going to talk about the Wechsler's intelligence test. So the Wechsler's intelligence test, or the WAIS, it contains verbal and nonverbal performance subsections, and it contains overall score as well as individual scores on subsections. And so there's 3 tests total, because you have the adult intelligence scale, there's one for children, and then there's one for preschool children. So it kind of helps teachers or even individuals trying to decipher what intelligence level maybe preschool children as well as adults fall on. And even with modern testing now, we have aptitude testing and achievement testing. So there is a difference between these 2. Aptitude testing is going to be designed to predict the future performance, and then achievement tests are designed to assess what has been learned. And then the construct of testing, or the principles, you need to understand that reliability is going to yield consistent results. So you want a test that yields consistent results each time. Then you want validity, which we've learned this before with research methods, where it's assessing what it is supposed to. The test has validity, it's valid, which is the root word. Standardization is going to be where tests are given to groups of people for whom the test is designed. Okay, standard, root word, standardized for everyone. And then norms would be standardized test scores, or standardized test scores against which all other scores are compared. So they have a certain norm or a bracket that is compared to all the other tests. And I'm going to stop here and pick up with the principles of test construction in a moment.